What's going on, guys? Nathan here, back again with another set review for Duskmourn and Duskmourn Commander. This time we are taking a look at all of the playable green cards within the Commander format. My name is Nathan, you're watching Salty Productions. Duskmourn comes out on September 27th, so very close to release date, and I just wanted to make this video to give you guys the best intel to look out for the best cards to play from the green color. First up, we have Formless Genesis, 3-mana Kindred Sorcery Shapeshifter with Changeling. Create an XX color Shapeshifter creature token with Changeling and Death Touch, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard, and it has Retrace, which means you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So not only is this a nice card to run in Delirium decks because it is both a Kindred and a Sorcery, which are two different types, but this is the first Changeling spell that we've seen that makes a Death Touch creature that's actually could be quite large. So we've seen Realmwalker before, we've seen Masked Vandal. These are very commonly run cards in green that have the Changeling ability, but we have not yet seen an XX Changeling in mono green, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. So there is a high possibility that this could be played in like your Snake tribal decks and things like that. Sashiro is sort of a popular commander for the Snake archetype, and of course this will go into your Changeling tribal decks. So shout out to Tomer from MTG Goldfish, who I believe has an Dragon Changeling tribal deck, where this will be yet another Changeling that you can run in that deck. And next up, we have Tyvar the Pummeler, 3-mana 3/3 elf warrior. Tap another untapped creature you control. Tyvar the Pummeler gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it, and we can pay 5 creatures you control, get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. I absolutely love Tyvar the Pummeler. He's sort of like a weird, overwhelming stampede effect that's stapled onto a body, and I guess a similar comparable here would be Azuri Renegade Leader, which also for 5 mana can give your elf creatures +3/+3 and trample. Notably, Tyvar does not give your creatures trample, so you're going to have to rely on some other method to give them that evasion, but I do like the fact that this is yet another playable overrun in green, and previously we had always been sort of stretching once you get past the Earthshaker Giant type of effects, and then I believe there's like an Eldrazi Boar, there's Endrace Forerunners, and the obvious Critter Hoof Behemoth. I think that this could definitely be run as just an 8-mana finisher, and then assuming you already have creatures that have trample, I think that they would probably be able to just get that evasion themselves, and this will be just a nice overrun to run. And the fact that it has protection built in is absolutely insane, so you're going to need to have exile base removal to get rid of Tyvar the Pummeler, and that's even in the 99. If he's your commander, he's basically a Crater Hoof in the command zone. So Tyvar the Pummeler, very cool card, and it's nice to have another tool in the overrun slot within mono green. Now, as far as where this could be run, I think this would fit right into your big stompy decks, Galta Primal Hunger, Xenagos, etc. This is just going to be a nice payoff in those stompy decks. Next, we have Demolisher Spawn, 7-mana enchantment creature horror, 7/7 with trample and haste. Whenever Demolisher Spawn attacks, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, other attacking creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. So speaking of good overruns, I think this could be slot into your Delirium decks. I'm a little bit hesitant to run this in a generic green deck. If you're not self-milling, I think it would be pretty hard to meet the Delirium stipulation here. So we already have cards like Earthshaker Giant, which is going to give you that pump effect right away, but it's only +3/+3 and trample. And I suppose it is worth noting too that Demolisher Spawn does not give your creatures trample along with the +4/+4, but it itself has trample and haste, which basically makes up for any damage that might not go over the top or get through if a couple of your creatures didn't have trample. So again, I think this is an option to run right along something like Tyvar the Pummeler, and also it's an enchantment, so it fits into your Enchantress decks, would go into your Delirium decks, of course, like Baba Saga Night Witch, and if you're self-milling, you're going to be running this Old Stick Fingers as a nice commander for self-milling, but it would fit right into Sithis as well, being an enchantment creature, and of course being Delirium, it meets 2 creature types as being both an enchantment permanent creature. So I think there's some good synergy here. I don't know if it would fit in a generic deck. It doesn't quite make the cut, but even having a 7/7 trample haste is decent in mono green. So nice to see here another overrun effect to fit in specific decks. Next, we have Shriekwood Devourer, 7 mana, 7/5 tree folk. It has trample. Whenever you attack with one or more creatures, untap up to X lands, where X is the greatest power among those creatures. So this is basically like an old Gnawbone with a Wilderness Reclamation effect stapled onto it. I think old Gnawbone is the best comparison here because the play patterns would be exactly the same. You know, you slam your Shriekwood Devourer, you attack, you get a crap load of mana, and then you absolutely go to town in your second main phase. So it's nice that you get to use those lands right away. Of course, Wilderness Reclamation, the difference there being that your end step untap all lands you control. So Shriekwood Devourer gets you the lands right away, which is very nice. And so you can use this to effectively double your mana for a 7 mana investment, which is pretty great. And this would go into your big fatty decks again. So Xenagos, God of Revels, Goreclaw, you know, all of the big creature decks that want to be making a ton of mana, slamming big creatures and going to town by turning them sideways. And next we have Altanak the Thrice-Called. So this is actually a little bit of a cute synergy here with Say Its Name, which is a brand new mono green card that's been printed here. And Say Its Name has some interesting art as well. So first of all, Say Its Name, 2 mana, sorcery, mill 3 cards. You may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. And then you can exile this card and 2 other cards named Say Its Name from your graveyard to search anywhere for Altanak the Thrice-Called and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle and activate only as a sorcery. So Altanak itself is a 9/9 with trample for 7 mana. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability and opponent controls, draw a card. But I think what most people will play this for actually is the channel ability. You can pay 2 and discard it to return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it ramps you, but it will get a very specific land out of your graveyard, which means you will almost always want to run this in your specific self-mill land decks. So I have Necrobloom here. Lord Windgrace is also a very popular land reanimator commander. Any deck that wants to reanimate Field of the Dead out of its graveyard basically is where you might run Altanak, but in Commander I probably wouldn't run the whole Say Its Name combo, especially because you can't in Singleton, I guess. It doesn't even stipulate that you can run any amount of them in your deck, so I guess literally you can't even run it in Commander. So you would just be looking at Altanak itself. So as a trample 9/9 for 7, I mean, it's a good body, but beyond that, it doesn't really do much else, and I don't think for 7 mana we want to be playing just raw stats onto the board, because we could be getting so much more fuel or acceleration for 7 mana. So I think you would have to care about the discard ability to get back a valuable land out of your graveyard. And moving on, we have Slavering Branchsnapper, which is an interesting name, I might add. 6 mana, 7/6 trample, and it has 4 cycling for 2. So a certain card that rhymes with Colossal Credmaw is absolutely in shambles. But just kidding, I would never run Slavering Branchsnapper over Colossal Dreadmaw, because of course Colossal Dreadmaw will win you the emotional game, so why would I run a straight downgrade to Colossal Dreadmaw? Now, other downgrades compared to Colossal Dreadmaw include Topiary Panther and Timberland Ancient in the Pauper EDH format. Topiary Panther has a basic land cycling ability for 2, and Timberland Ancient has a 4 cycling for 2, so this is straight up power creep in Pauper to run over these lands instead, and it's even a power boost compared to the Colossal Dreadmaw. But of course, everybody, Colossal Dreadmaw still holds a valuable place in my deck, and it will not go away because, once again, Slavering Branchsnapper does not win you the emotional games. So moving on from Pauper EDH, our next card is Hauntwoods Shrieker, which is a 3 mana 3/3 beast mutant. When it attacks, manifests Dread, and then we can pay to reveal target face down permanent. If it's a creature card, you may turn it face up. This is the first ability of its kind that we have seen in mono green that allows us to turn a face down permanent face up. So this will go right into your face down and morph decks. The closest comparison here is Overgrown Zealot, which only makes mana to allow you to turn your permanents face up. Beyond that, we have not gotten just a regular 2 mana ability to turn target face down, permanent face up. So first of its kind here, which is pretty nice. And so this is going to be run in those face down decks. So like Cowst Eyes of the Glade, 2 mana, 2/2. Whenever creature you control that was turned face up, this turn deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and then we can tap it, turn target face down, attack and creature you control face up. So we have to go into Naya colors to get an equivalent effect, and also for cheap actually, because we can only tap Cowst instead of paying the 2, but that means we can only use it once per turn instead of just paying 2 to reveal all of our Manifest Dreads. Now this would go into your regular face down decks. Kadena, Slinking Sorcerer, would absolutely love this, along with Animar if you're running Animar as sort of like a morph commander. Next we have Curator Beastie, 6 mana 6/6 beast with reach. Colorless creatures you control enter with 2 additional 1/1 counters on them, so a little bit of nice go wide synergy there. Whenever Curator Beastie enters or attacks, manifest Dread. So a nice Titan effect to manifest Dread. This will be an absolute bomb in Limited, by the way. Oh my gosh, will this generate you a ton of card advantage by manifesting Dread. So this is very nice because once it enters, it immediately makes a 4/4, and once it starts attacking, it makes 4/4s as well. So that's pretty crazy, and you also get additional synergy with the additional 1/1 counters. So if you can build around this in like a Vannifar deck, that's even better. And we don't yet have a Titan effect that allows us to manifest Dread. So our closest comparison here that would manifest Dread at the same rate of Curator Beastie would perhaps be Hauntwoods Shrieker, with only the attack trigger, but we just don't yet have a card that allows us to do this. So it's nice to get the addition of Curator Beastie for your face down decks. Whisperwood Elemental kind of sort of does this at a similar pace, but it only triggers at the beginning of your end step, and it's only a regular manifest instead of manifest Dread. So just the first of its kind that we've seen, so very good card here in your face down decks. And like the other card, Curator Beastie and Hauntwoods Shrieker, I believe would go into your face down deck. So Kadena, and then especially Vannifar with Curator Beastie, because typically Vannifar will have some sort of +1/+1 synergy built into this deck, so like Hardened Scales and the like, so you can make use of those counters with Curator Beastie. And next on our list, we have Overlord of the Hauntwoods, 5 mana 6/5 enchantment creature avatar horror with impending 4 for 3 mana. So it says if you cast a spell for its impending cost, it enters with 4 time counters on it and isn't a creature until the last is removed. At the beginning of your end step, remove a time counter from it. Whenever Overlord of the Hauntwoods enters or attacks, create a tapped colorless land token named Everywhere that is every basic land type. So interesting synergy for domain type of decks. Now, we have not seen this exact effect before because this basically ramps out a command tower onto the battlefield for 3 mana, assuming that you're going to be paying that impending cost, which I think most people will probably play it for the impending cost. And once it enters as an enchantment, it'll trigger all of your Enchantress synergies. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, we got a card called Tower Winder, which will search your library or graveyard for command tower and put it into your hand, so it doesn't go onto the battlefield like Overlord would, but kind of a similar comparison there. And another sort of similar effect, although not exactly the same. Dryad of the Elysian Grove is an enchantment creature and makes all lands you control every basic land type in addition to their other types. So this is the first card that will make a land token that is every basic land type. So very interesting effect in Commander. Also, we don't yet have a dedicated domain deck in Commander. There's no Signpost Commander for domain, but I do think a lot of people run 5-color commanders, just like any 5-color commander, and then if they have a domain deck. So the best sort of domain spells in Commander, in my personal opinion, are Trump the Domains, which I do use in some 5-color decks of mine, which says until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and get +1/+1 for each basic land type among lands you control. And then Herd Migration is also somewhat decent. 7 mana, says create a 3/3 beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control. And then there's extra discard ability here. Pay 2, discard a search library for basic land card, reveal, put it into your hand, then shuffle, gain 3 life. So this is, I guess, another addition to those domain decks. We don't have a ton of playable domain cards in mono green, so you're definitely going to have to be leveraging cards from other colors. Given Tromp and Herd Migration are really the best of the bunch, and I don't think many other domain cards in mono green, at least, are really playable in Commander. So this will be an excellent addition to that toolbox. So where would you play this? either in a domain deck again, or there's also the new commander called Omo, Queen of Vesuva from Modern Horizons 3, which says when it enters the battlefield or attacks, put an everything counter on each of up to one target land and up to one target creature. Each land with an everything counter on it is every land type in addition to other types, and each non-land creature with an everything counter on it is every creature type. So I'm sure there are some sort of shenanigans you could pull with a land token named everywhere. That's every basic land type in an Omo deck. Also, I do honestly like the Overlord of the Hauntwoods for its mana fixing potential. So just color fixing in an 5-color enchantment deck. So I immediately thought of like Tom Bombadil, which really wants you to be fixing Wooburg mana so that you can cast Tom and start getting more value from your sagas. So I think Overlord of the Hauntwoods is playable in those decks. In a generic deck, I think 3 mana to ramp out a command tower is not quite good enough for 2024 Commander. But if you have extra synergies that will play off of the enchantment creature type, domain, or the fact that you have the domain token named everywhere, then I think you could possibly consider this in those decks. And moving on here, we have Kona Rescue Beastie, 4-mana 4/3 Beast Survivor. Survival at the beginning of your second main phase of Kona Rescue Beastie is tapped. You may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. And the flavor text here, she's got a heart of gold, a nose for danger, and jaws that can pulverize a Cellar Spawn with a single snap. So this is going to be just a great card for cheating in Eldrazi. My gosh, is this going to be a super scary commander. I would not be surprised if this was one of the commanders where you get targeted first out of the gate, just because immediately you can start, you can basically by turn 4, if you have some way to tap Kona, which is somewhat trivial because we have Cryptolith Rite effects, which will make all of your creatures into mana dorks. We also have Springleaf Drum, which allows you to generate mana from your creatures as well. This is just going to be an absolutely scary commander, and I hate that this is not a dog or creature type. It would be nice to slot this into various dog decks, given that it clearly looks like a dog, but I guess in Duskmourn we don't have just regular dogs other than that one red enduring card, which I forget off the top of my head, but I'll have it up here as well. And for comparables, we have Elvish Piper and Monster Manual. So Elvish Piper is one of the scariest creatures to see your opponents play. You can pay 1, tap it. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Notably, Kona does not need to pay mana to do this. You just need a way to tap it, and it can do a permanent card. So you can be dropping massive planeswalkers with Kona onto the battlefield as well, or just giant enchantments perhaps. Monster Manual, similar card here. For the artifact side of it, you can pay 2, tap it. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. So where are you going to be running Kona Rescue Beastie? I honestly think most of the time this is going to be run as a commander, but if you were looking at decks that Elvish Piper is already run in, you would see maybe perhaps Sirdan the Shipwright, which, by the way, this art gives me heavy Legend of Zelda vibes. Not sure why. It just makes me think of Legend of Zelda. But Sirdan is a 5-mana 3/4 elf noble. When it says when it enters the battlefield or attacks, each player secretly votes for a player, then those votes are revealed. Each player draws a card for each vote they received. Each player who received no votes may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. And with both of these commanders, you are going to be dropping such massive Eldrazi. Kozilek Butcher of the Truth is probably best to drop because it has that giant Annihilator 4, and with one swing, even if you don't get the cast trigger, one swing on Annihilator 4 will basically take one opponent out of the game. So Kona Rescue Beastie is going to be incredibly scary, and wow, what an incredible card. And up next, we have Hedge Shredder. Speaking of wildly powerful cards, 4-mana, 5/5 artifact vehicle. When it attacks, you may mill 2 cards. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. And it only has crew 1. Crew 1! Anything can crew this thing. You can turn a 1/1 into a 5/5. But most importantly, this is going to be one of the best combo mill pieces that any land deck or reanimator deck wants this instantly. I think this is going to be a contender for best card in Duskmourn that has been printed, and possibly most expensive card from Duskmourn, because I think everybody is going to be scooping up Hedge Shredder for their land reanimation decks. So imagine this, right? All of these decks already run Mesmeric Orb, Hermit Druid, the likes, that you are going to be milling possibly, we'll say 10 to 20 cards from either of these 2-mana cards. And of that, if you have Hedge Shredder on the field, you're going to be able to ramp, well, let's say easy math, for 50% if you mill 20 cards with each of these, and half of them are lands, then you're going to get about 10 lands off of Hedge Shredder for 4 mana. Now, this is a card, I will admit, it does not much the turn it comes down, but if you have any sort of mill synergy built around this, then this card is the best card in your deck. And just to really have this sink in, the best comparables that we have today would be something like an Animus Awakening, which is X and a green sorcerer. Reveal the top X cards of your library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield, tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, that's sort of comparable here. I think you just need to feed a lot into X to get a lot of lands. I think a better comparison might be Wrenn 7, which for its 0 ability says just put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, and that is for 5 mana. So that would be a decent effect even on a sorcery, but we do get a planeswalker in the form of Wrenn 7. So this card just has the ability to generate you so much mana, and I think that if you run this with like an Amulet of Vigor, where your lands enter untapped, you can absolutely storm off with Hedge Shredder, and this will certainly be a combo piece in those self-milled decks, such as the Necrobloom Lord Windgrace. This is going to be such a windmill slam in my Necrobloom deck. Hedge Shredder, cannot believe this effect was printed. This is the first of its kind, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing at how this will win people games. And then next up, we have Disorienting Choice, 4 mana sorcery. For each opponent, choose up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. For each permanent chosen this way, its controller may exile it. Then, if one or more of the chosen permanents are still on the battlefield, you search your library for up to that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Now, this is a very wordy way of saying for each opponent, you choose 1 artifact or enchantment. Then that player has the choice to either exile it or give you any land out of your deck tapped. This is pretty insane, and I think this is mostly going to be used to search for your uber powerful lands such as Field of the Dead, Ancient Tomb, Glacial Chasm, Maze of Ith, these super powerful, hard to interact with lands. So this is like a weird Druid of Purification combined with Tempt with Discovery effect. Druid of Purification, of course, can get multiple artifact or enchantments, and Tempt with Discovery will always get you a land, but has the potential to get more. So the hard part about Disorienting Choice is your opponents have to have artifacts or enchantments to target in order to get the choice to search up a land card. I think most of the time, honestly, your opponents are going to let you get the land because you're probably not going to be targeting just a signet with this, right? It's going to be something important like a Chimil or something like that that needs to get off the battlefield. So I think you probably run this mostly for the land tutor effect because and the fact that your opponents have the final say in whether their artifact or enchantment gets exiled is really disappointing, because if you need to snipe your opponent's One Ring, for example, this is not going to get the job done. So I would look at this mostly as a ramp spell where you're really just holding your artifacts or enchantments that your opponents control hostage in order for them to give you the land. So I would look at this more as a Tempt with Discovery effect, more so than a Druid of Purification. And this will probably, once again, be used to search up your Field of the Dead and your Glacial Chasm and all of these broken lands. And you probably want this in your Lord Windgrace effects decks as well. Then we have Enduring Vitality, 3 mana enchantment creature Outglimmer, 3/3 vigilance. Creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. When Enduring Vitality dies, if it was a creature returned to the battlefield under its owner's control as an enchantment. So we've seen this before in the form of Cryptolith Rite, and we have gotten Elven Chorus in the Lord of the Rings set as well. So Cryptolith Rite, for 1 less mana, we do get the same ability. However, Enduring Vitality, if you care about the fact that it's a creature that can be reanimated, or just the fact that it's a 3/3 vigilant body, then you might want to run this over Cryptolith Rite, but it is technically not as efficient as Cryptolith Rite. Right? Of course, Enduring Vitality is more enduring because it will come back once it dies as just a regular enchantment, so it's a little bit harder to remove. Elven Chorus does give you the extra card advantage, but once again, it is not a creature. So I think you have to care about this being a creature in the actual 3/3 body in order for this to be worth it. So where would you run this? Probably in your enchantment decks. Sithis Harvest Hand. A recent card we've gotten is Wildseer Scouring Maw, which is an interesting enchantress kind of commander. It gives enchantment spells you cast from your hand Cascade. Mostly your enchantress decks are going to be either Bant or Selesnya, like Tuvasa, for example, is another enchantress effect that deck that would love this. So Enduring Vitality will definitely see a home in those types of decks. And then next up we have Valgavoth's Onslaught, XX in a green sorcery, manifest dread X times, then put X 1/1 counters on each of those creatures. So a nice scaling effect to just get a ton of power on board, which also doubles as pseudo card advantage because you can then flip those creatures face up. I think the math here is that it scales decently well, but it doesn't overwhelm me for a commander card, because if we were to say X is 1, so we're paying 3 mana to manifest dread 1 time, and then you put 1/1 counter on that creature, so you get a total of 3 power. That's not very good. For 5 mana, we get 2 2/2s. For 7 mana, we get 3 5/5s, and then for 9 mana, we get 4 8/8s, I believe. So it's good stat generation, but it doesn't blow me away. But this will be a good bomb in your face down type of decks. So the only comparables I could really find, we don't yet have this effect in mono green, so I think this is really the first of its kind with Valgavoth's Onslaught, but we do have other manifest generators. So Ghastly Conscription is the most comparable card I think I could find, which is mono black. Says exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard in a face down pile, shuffle that pile, then manifest those cards, and that is for 7 mana. And then Omarthus says whenever it dies, manifest a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of counters on it. So you can have these sort of explosive manifest style of effects, but Valgavoth's Onslaught will also fill your graveyard with the manifest dread component, so I think it's a little bit better there. The only other thing I was thinking is, and the reason why it doesn't blow me away, is why would I not just run Genesis Wave over this card in a generic deck? If you care about face down creatures, great. If you're going to have extra synergy with colorless creatures or something like that, great. But with the same amount of mana you would put into Valgavoth's Onslaught, I would rather just cast a Genesis Wave in a generic deck, because I would get my creatures with their ETB effects and lands with Genesis Wave if we were to pay like a total of 8 mana into it, where X is equal to like 5 or 6, for example. So I don't know, Valgavoth's Onslaught I think will fit into those specific face down decks like Kadena and Zimone, but it doesn't quite make the cut into your generic green decks, I believe, because you would just run Genesis Wave instead. And the last card we have here before we get to the honorable mentions is Coordinated Clobbering, 1 mana sorcery. Tap 1 or 2 target untapped creatures you control. They each deal damage equal to their power to target creature an opponent controls. This is very nice, I think, because while it is sorcery speed, the fact that we can tap up to 2 target untapped creatures means that we don't have to run this in a big stompy deck in order to be able to reliably remove whatever we need to remove off of the board. Typically, you need to run bite spells and fight spells in big stompy decks in order to have enough power on board to reliably deal damage to whatever you want to deal damage to. With Coordinated Clobbering, it is sorcery speed, which is very much a downside. So we do have an equivalent effect in the form of Hard-Hitting Question, which is a 1 mana sorcery. Target creature control deals damage equal to its power to target creature planeswalker you don't control. By the way, these are known as bite effects instead of fight effects. Fight effects is where 2 target creatures will fight, which means they both deal damage equal to their power to each other, whereas bite spells will actually deal damage. Just 1 target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another. And ram through, in order to get up to instant speed, we need to pay 1 more mana, so a total of 2 mana for an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. If the creature you control has trample, excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. So we do need to step it up to 2 mana here, but if you're running Hard-Hitting Questions, you might run Coordinated Clobbering alongside it. If we look at fight spells, for example, fight spells do actually get a mana discount. So for an instant speed fight spell, we have Tail Swipe, 1 mana instant, choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast a spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn, then those creatures fight each other. So the obvious downside here is that the other creature you're fighting might destroy your own creature, but typically you don't run fight spells unless you're in a big stompy deck, so you do get a bit of a discount for being a little bit more niche and taking some risk with your own creature in case case they have like an instant speed death touch spell or something like that. So you'd probably run this in your big stompy decks against Selval Heart of the Wilds, classic mono green stompy commander, and then Xenagos will actually buff your creatures up. So if you can get your creatures to be massive with that triggered ability, then you can have an even better chance of taking out a massive creature with coordinated clobbering. And with that, I believe that takes us to our honorable mentions category. So these would be cards that didn't quite move the needle in green within Commander, but may serve a niche use case that I wanted to mention to you guys anyway. So first up, we have Twitching Doll, 2-mana 2/2 artifact creature spider toy. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, put a nest counter on Twitching Doll, then you can tap and sack it, create a 2/2 green spider creature token with reach for each counter on Twitching Doll, activate only as a sorcery. Now notably, it does not specifically specify the nest counters. You can actually stack up 1/1 counters on Twitching Doll to then tap it and sack it to create even more green spider creature tokens. So a little bit of interesting counter synergy here, but I figured this may be an add in those spider decks. So Ishkana Graph Widow is a popular spider commander because it has Delirium. When it enters, if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, create 3/1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach. So there could be some interesting synergy there in your spider decks with Twitching Doll. Then we have Horrid Vigor, 2-mana instant, target creature gains death touch and indestructible until end of turn, which actually reminded me of a recent Modern Horizons 3 card, I believe, called Gift of the Viper. 1-mana instant, put a +1/+1 counter, a reach counter, and a death touch counter on target creature, untap it. Now, in Pauper EDH, Horrid Vigor essentially reads as destroy target attacking creature, especially because it gives your creature indestructible, so there's no risk of it actually dying once it is blocking. And we don't yet have a green instant that gives something death touch and indestructible at the same time. So first of its kind of effect at the common rarity here. So very playable in Pauper and perhaps even playable in normal Commander if you care about the death touch and indestructible keywords. So with that, that is going to wrap up our honorable mentions category. And now we move to our top 3 green cards from Duskmourn and Duskmourn Commander. If we could have a drum roll, please. We have Hedge Shredder, Kona Rescue Beastie, and Tyvar the Pummeler. So Hedge Shredder, one of the most powerful cards that has been printed in green in a long time if you are in the right deck. My gosh, is this going to absolutely combo out many tables. And you're not going to recognize it immediately, but once your opponent is putting 10 lands into play with 1, self-mill spell, this is going to be absolutely excellent. And not to mention, even if it goes into your like Simic or Sultai decks that are going to leverage blue and black self-mill, so it's going to be absolutely insane there. Kona Rescue Beastie is just going to be plopping down Eldrazi's on turn 4. What more could you want from that in a big stompy commander like Kona? And I think it's honestly almost too good. I think Kona is if you run it as your commander, is probably going to get you targeted first. So just be aware of that. And then Tyvar the Pummeler is just another great addition for an overrun effect. I look at it as an 8-mana overrun effect because you're probably going to slam Tyvar and then pay the 5 right away. But you could just cast this for 3 and hope you untap with it and then just pay the 5 to give the overrun effect. But just another great addition to our overrun toolkit here. So that is the best green cards from Duskmourn and Duskmourn Commander. You've been watching Salty Productions. I have made my white, blue, black, red, and colorless videos, and then I still need to make my multicolored video, so I'll be coming out with that soon here. But that is going to wrap us up for the green color. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it. If you want to stay tuned for more content like this, particularly that multicolored video, subscribe to stay tuned for more. And I also come out with just magic content on a regular basis, so stay tuned for that once we get past all of the Duskmourn set reviews. And with that, I think I'll wrap up the video here. So thank you all for watching once again. Hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.